Welcome to this explainer. We are diving right into a file today that CBC News has actually called Canada's best documented UFO encounter. We're talking about the Falcon Lake incident of 1967. It's fascinating, it involves physical evidence, and it is highly debated. So, whether you're a firm believer in the unexplained or a dedicated skeptic, this case has something that is absolutely going to grab your attention. Let's get into it. We've got to start with a medical mystery that completely baffled doctors and left a literal mark on a Canadian industrial mechanic named Stefan Michalak. His son, Stan, vividly recalled these bizarre injuries, saying that the exact same pattern of holes from the grid on the side of the craft appeared as red spots on his father's lower abdomen. And it's really this physical element that takes the whole story from a standard UFO sighting to an enduring, tangible mystery.
So, the ultimate question we are trying to answer today is simply this. What actually happened out there in the Manitoba woods on May 20th, 1967? To figure that out, we're going to break down Michalak's claims, look closely at that physical evidence he brought back, and then weigh all of it against the really rigorous counter-arguments that skeptics have built around this file.
Section 1. The Encounter. A prospector's harrowing tale. Okay, picture this. It's midday and Michalak is out prospecting when he spots two strange, cigarette-shaped objects glowing red descending from the sky. One of them takes off, but the other lands just 50 meters away. He actually walks right up to it. He says it looks like seamless steel, and he reaches out and touches it, which instantly melts the tips of his gloves. Suddenly, the craft lifts off, shooting out this blast of hot gas. It knocks him completely flat, sets his shirt on fire, and leaves him with severe burns, nausea, and disorientation as he escapes the woods.
Now, here's where this story takes a really unexpected turn. You'd think he'd say it was aliens, right? Nope, Michalak never actually claimed the craft was extraterrestrial. He specifically noted it smelled strongly of sulfur, hissed with air, gave off a bright violet light, and, most surprisingly, he heard voices coming from inside that were, in his words, definitely human. He even tried yelling out to them in a few different languages, but got absolutely no response.
Section 2. Traces of physical evidence, left behind in the dirt.
The reason authorities jumped on this, we're talking the RCMP, Air Force, and Department of Health, was the sheer amount of physical stuff Michalak brought back. It's a really complex mix of evidence. His burnt shirt initially didn't show any radiation, but the soil sample he took from the landing site, that tested highly radioactive. And when the RCMP finally got out to the actual location, they found a 30-foot circle where the vegetation and moss had just been completely burnt or inexplicably removed.
Section 3. The skeptic's perspective, alternative explanations.
Of course, every good investigation needs to look at all the angles, and the official reports paint a pretty different picture. For instance, Michalak said a spaceship's exhaust burned him, but the highway patrol constable who first found him actually suspected Michalak might just have been dealing with a massive hangover, suggesting the burns were from some mundane earthly accident. Also, Michalak originally refused to give up the exact location of the site, saying he wanted to prevent people from getting radiation sickness. Skeptics? Well, they theorized he'd actually struck a super valuable vein of nickel and completely invented the UFO story just to scare competing prospectors away.
Things got even stranger about a year later in 1968. Those perfect grid-like burns, they mysteriously reappeared on Michalak's stomach. He ended up being evaluated by a Mayo Clinic psychiatrist. Now, the doctor concluded the wounds were obviously factitious, which is medical speak for self-inflicted. But strangely enough, he couldn't find any evidence of mental illness. This added a massive layer of doubt for investigators, especially because the medical records from the original 1967 incident described his burns as irregular, not the perfect grid pattern that showed up in photographs a whole year later.
But what about the highly radioactive soil? Well, investigators had earthly explanations for that too. Chemists pointed out that the radiation could just be from a natural radium vein running right under that specific part of Manitoba. Or, even wilder, they suggested the site might have been intentionally contaminated to hoax the whole investigation. How? By using commercially available radium-based paint, literally the exact same stuff they used to make glow-in-the-dark watches back in the day.
Section 4. The psychology of sightings, a broader phenomenon. Let's zoom out from Falcon Lake for a second to look at the psychology behind encounters like this. Why do these stories resonate so deeply with us? In 1998, psychologist Susan Blackmore challenged a lot of UFO abduction statistics by pointing to known psychological tricks of the brain. A big one is the false awakening. This is when you dream that you've woken up, and it's heavily tied to sleep paralysis and that utterly terrifying feeling that there's a strange presence in the room with you.
Dr. Blackmore took a hard look at a famous 1992 Roper poll. This poll used 5 specific markers to try and track alien abductions in the general public. Waking up paralyzed, feeling like you're flying, missing time, seeing balls of light, and finding weird scars on your body. If someone answered yes to most of these, the folks running the poll considered it really strong evidence that the person had been abducted.
The numbers they got back were wild. Out of almost 6,000 people asked, 2% hit on 4 or 5 of those indicators. Now, 2% might sound tiny, but if you map that on to the entire U.S. population at the time, you're talking about 3.7 million people. Psychologists point to this and argue it actually proves the exact opposite of a mass alien invasion. It shows just how incredibly common these specific psychological markers are, meaning that experiences people interpret as otherworldly are often just widespread, totally human psychological events.
Section 5. A lasting cultural legacy. The immortalization of Falcon Lake.
Regardless of what actually went down, a genuine identified craft, a prospector telling a tall tale, or some complex psychological event, the Falcon Lake incident left a huge mark on Canadian lore. To give you an idea of just how big, think about the number 4,000. Back in 2018, the Royal Canadian Mint actually produced a glow-in-the-dark $20 silver coin showing the encounter. They only minted 4,000 of them, and they sold out incredibly fast. It just proves how much this story still captivates the public.
And the actual physical pieces of this mystery are treated as genuine historical artifacts. Michalak's burnt shirt and hat, the exact ones that the RCMP and Air Force poked and prodded back in the 60s. They didn't just get thrown away. They were meticulously preserved and donated to the University of Manitoba archives in 2019, which means researchers are going to be able to study them for generations.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, we're left with a massive puzzle. We have to balance tangible things, like real physical burns and highly radioactive dirt, against some pretty sharp skeptical logic regarding natural radium, self-inflicted wounds, and hidden mineral claims. What do you think? Was this an outer-worldly encounter, an elaborate hoax to protect a payday, or is it just something we simply don't have the science to understand yet? It is a mystery that is just as thrilling today as it was in those Manitoba woods back in 1967. Thanks for exploring this file with me, and keep questioning the unexplained.